The operating room lights burned white and merciless. Anita Ramirez stepped back from the table, peeling off blood-soaked gloves with hands that had stopped trembling hours ago. On the steel tray beside her lay 2.3 kilograms of human tissue, dark and glistening under the fluorescent glare. 10 years, she whispered, to no one in particular. 10 years of growth. A nurse dabbed perspiration from the surgeon's forehead. The boy on the table, 15 years old, breathed through a ventilator with mechanical precision, half his face wrapped in gauze, half still bearing the evidence of what had been removed. What I pulled from his face today, Dr. Ramirez said, her voice catching, wasn't just a tumor. The surgical team exchanged glances. They had seen the scans. They knew the statistics. 47 rejections, a decade of suffering. The monitor beeped steadily. Fade to black 3 months earlier. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Millbrook, West Virginia, sat in the crease of the Appalachian Mountains like a secret someone forgot to keep. Population 3,200. 4 white churches lined Main Street, their steeples competing for heaven's attention. Miller's Hass and Grocery anchored the center of town, its neon sign flickering the word open in reluctant pulses. Beyond the last row of houses, an abandoned coal mine entrance gapped like a wound that never healed. Every morning, fog rolled through the valley, thick and gray, as if the mountains themselves were exhaling ghosts. Everyone knew everyone's business here. That was both comfort and curse. Ethan Carter was 15 years old, though most of Millbrook hadn't seen him since he was 7. The left side of his face bore an arteriovenous malformation that had grown with him, relentless and patient. The tumor drooped past his jawline, covering his left eye completely. He'd been blind on that side since he turned 10. The tissue was discolored, purplish red, heavy enough to pull his neck sideways, so he always sat hunched, his head tilted right like a question no one wanted to answer. He wore the same oversized gray hoodie 365 days a year. It had been washed so many times the fabric felt like water against his skin. Inside the house on Maple Street, Ethan lived behind a green curtain in the window alcove. He filled sketchbooks obsessively. 47 of them now, stacked like a paper tower in the corner of his room. In each one, he drew the same face over and over, normal face number 1, number 2, number 3,287, symmetrical features, 2 working eyes, a jaw that sat straight. A red balloon stayed attached to the window frame. Renewed each morning. Still alive, it said, still here. The mirror on his dresser had been covered with a white cloth for 10 years. He couldn't remember the last time he'd looked at his reflection on purpose. On the nightstand sat his grandfather's pocket watch, tarnished silver with an inscription on the back. Courage is fear that has said its prayers. His grandfather had carried it through World War II, died before Ethan's face became what it was now. Sometimes Ethan was grateful for that. Sarah Louise Carter was 41 and looked 50. She'd been a homecoming queen once, in a lifetime that felt like someone else's memory. Now premature gray streaked through her brown hair. She was thin from meals skipped and given to her son instead. Her eyes carried the particular exhaustion of mothers who've stopped sleeping years ago. She wore hospital scrubs constantly because she lived in them, working the night shift at Millbrook Community Hospital as a nurse. Day 3287 began like all the others. Ethan woke behind the green curtain as morning sun filtered through, casting gold and shadow in broken streaks across his small alcove. He reached for the red balloon first, tying it carefully to the window latch. The ritual mattered. It meant he'd made it through another night. He opened sketchbook number 47 to a fresh page and began drawing normal face number 3287. His hand trembled as he sketched symmetrical features, two eyes that matched, a jawline that sat level. He erased the mouth 3 times before getting it right, or right enough. He was never satisfied. Children's laughter drifted through the walls as they walked to school. Mrs. Patterson's television blared through the thin barrier between their houses, some morning show with 2 bright voices. In the next room, his mother's alarm clock buzzed. Ethan listened to her footsteps, the creak of floorboards he'd memorized years ago. Church bells struck 6, his Pastor Miller's morning service. Ethan counted down. 10 hours and 23 minutes until his mother came home. The mail arrived at 8:30. The postman never knocked anymore, just left the stack at the gate and hurried back to his truck. Sarah retrieved it on her way to the car, already dressed for her second job of the day. She'd worked the night shift at the hospital, come home to shower, and now headed out to clean houses on the hill. The white envelope sat on top, insurance company logo in the corner. Her hands didn't shake when she opened it. She'd learned not to hope. "We regret to inform you that your request for coverage has been denied. The condition in question is classified as pre-existing and therefore falls outside the parameters of your current policy. The estimated cost of treatment, $287,000, cannot be approved at this time." Sarah folded the letter with mechanical precision, walked to her car, opened the glove compartment, retrieved the metal box she kept there, added this letter to the 46 others already inside. She sat behind the wheel and gripped it with both hands until her knuckles went white. 47, she whispered. Each letter weighed 0.3 ounces. 47 letters equaled 14 ounces total, less than a pound. That's what the insurance companies thought her son's life was worth. Less than a pound of paper saying no. From his window, Ethan watched his mother's shoulders slump forward. He wanted to call out, to tell her he'd heard, that he knew, that she didn't have to carry this alone. But he stayed silent behind his curtain. Some kindnesses required distance. Later, he would draw 47 trees in a single landscape. At 9:15, Sarah made her first call for her third job, medical debt collector for Millbrook Community Hospital, the same hospital where she worked nights, saving lives. During the day, she called people who couldn't pay their bills and demanded money they didn't have. Today's call was a woman with a daughter who had leukemia, $34,000 in debt, 3 months overdue. The woman was crying before Sarah finished her scripted introduction. "Please, we need more time. We're trying, I swear, we're trying." Sarah read from the paper in front of her. "Ma'am, the hospital requires payment within 30 days, or we'll be forced to pursue legal action. My daughter is dying." "Don't you people understand that she's dying?" Sarah's throat closed. She understood better than this woman could possibly know. She had her own daughter's ghost in her head. except her ghost was still breathing, still drawing, still counting days behind a green curtain. "I'll note your account, ma'am," Sarah said, her voice cracking despite years of practice. She hung up, opened her car door, vomited onto the pavement. The irony tasted like copper. She collected debts identical to the $80,000 she owed the same hospital. She demanded payment from people who were her. She was the monster in someone else's nightmare while living her own. She splashed water on her face from a bottle in her cup holder, reapplied lipstick. The mask of normalcy required maintenance. Her next job was cleaning the Morrison house. Big Colonial on the hill. She scrubbed their toilets and dusted their family photos. In one picture, the Morrisons smiled at Disney World, all four of them healthy and whole. Sarah did the math without meaning to. That vacation cost more than Ethan's surgery would have. She didn't know Mr. Morrison was an insurance executive. She cleaned his house every Tuesday and Thursday, and he signed the checks that denied coverage to families like hers. The world was full of these small, cruel ironies. The knock came on a Tuesday morning when Ethan was alone. He froze mid-stroke, pencil hovering above the page. Nobody knocked on their door. Delivery drivers left packages at the gate. Neighbors had learned years ago to pretend the Carter house didn't exist. A second knock, lighter this time, almost polite. "Hello?" A woman's voice, young and unfamiliar. "My name is Rebecca Morgan. I'm with Healing Faces Foundation. We're offering free health assessments in the area this week." Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. He pressed himself further into the corner behind his curtain, making his body as small as possible. Through the gap in the fabric, he could see her, mid-20s, dark hair pulled back, clipboard in hand. She wore jeans and a sweater, an ID badge clipped to her belt. Something about her seemed different from Millbrook, softer edges, maybe, or just the fact that she'd knocked instead of staring from across the street. She glanced toward his window. For one impossible second, their eyes met through the sliver of space between curtain and wall. His right eye, the one that still worked, locked with hers. He waited for the familiar sequence recognition, shock, revulsion, retreat. Instead, she simply nodded, a small acknowledgement. "I see you." Then she looked away, not in disgust, but in respect for his privacy. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Rebecca tucked a brochure into the doorframe and wrote something on a card, which she left on top. "No pressure," she called out, her voice gentle. "Just information. If you're interested, my cell number's on the card." He watched her walk back to an old Honda Civic and drive away. For 3 hours, Ethan stared at that door. Finally, when the sun had shifted enough that the porch was in shadow, he crept out from behind his curtain. His legs felt strange, unreliable. He hadn't been near the front door in months. He opened it just wide enough to grab the brochure and card. Healing Faces Foundation, volunteer surgeons, partnership with hospitals across 3 states, before and after photos of children with craniofacial conditions, cleft palates repaired, burned scars reduced, tumors removed, real face, real transformations is on the card. Rebecca had written her cell number and added, "No obligation, just a conversation, if you want one." Ethan memorized the number without meaning to. He couldn't help it. 10 digits that might mean everything or nothing. He wanted to believe God. He wanted to believe, but he'd learned not to hope. Hope was expensive, and they were bankrupt in every way that mattered. Still, he kept the card. That evening, Sarah came home carrying a paper bag with their groceries. Instant rice, canned beans, a loaf of bread that would last them 4 days if they were careful. She looked like she'd aged another year in the 8 hours since Ethan had last seen her. "Someone came today," Ethan said, without turning from his sketch. Sarah's entire body went rigid. "Who?" "A woman. Rebecca. Said something about free health assessments." The grocery bag crinkled in Sarah's grip. Her jaw tightened, that familiar defensive armor sliding into place. "Baby, you know we've tried everything. These programs, they all have wait lists or requirements we don't meet or—" "I know," Ethan interrupted quietly. 47 times. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. Sarah's face crumpled. "You've been counting." "Of course I've been counting, Mom. I hear everything, the phone call, the letters, the crying in the bathroom. I've always heard." Sarah crossed the small living room and sat beside him on the floor, something she rarely did anymore, as if proximity to his pain might make it contagious, or perhaps because bearing witness hurt too much. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I tried to protect you from— I don't need protection from the truth. I need—" He trailed off, not knowing how to finish that sentence. Sarah noticed the brochure on the table, picked it up with shaking hands. She studied the before and after photos, the testimonials from Appalachians' families, the list of partner hospitals. Her nurse's brain cataloged every detail, searching for the catch. "Did she say anything else?" Sarah asked. "She saw me through this closet." Ethan's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "And she didn't run." That detail, more than anything else, made Sarah's heart twist. Her son's metric for kindness was someone not fleeing in horror. The bar had been set so devastatingly low. "I'll call tomorrow," Sarah said, surprising herself, "just to ask questions. No promises." "You don't have to." "I know, but what if—" She stopped, afraid to finish the thought out loud. What if this time was different? What if hope wasn't always a liar? 7 days later, Rebecca returned. Sarah answered the door this time, arms already crossed, ready for disappointment. "If this is about money," Sarah started. "It's not," Rebecca said simply. "Can I show you something?" On the porch, Rebecca opened a folder. Inside were medical documents, surgeon credentials, detailed before and after photos with notes about procedures and recovery times, success rates, hospital partnerships, grant funding sources. "Why Millbrook?" Sarah asked. "We're not exactly on anyone's map." "Pastor Miller contacted us 6 months ago. Took time to arrange funding and find the right surgical team." Sarah's skepticism didn't waver. "And what's the catch?" "There's always a catch." Rebecca met her eyes directly. "Free initial assessment, MRI, CT scan, consultation with our head surgeon. If Ethan's a candidate for surgery, costs are covered through foundation grants and volunteer surgeon time. No obligation, no hidden fees." "But," Sarah pressed, "but I can't promise miracles. I can't promise he'll be approved, and I have to be honest about risks." Rebecca pulled out another document. "If this is an AVIM, arteriovenous malformation, surgery near the brain carries significant mortality risk, 40 to 60% chance of complications." Sarah's medical training kicked in. so he could die on the table. Or the malformation could rupture on its own, based on typical progression. Without intervention, life expectancy rarely extends beyond 20. You're saying he's dying either way. I'm saying there are options, and you deserve to know what they are. Sarah studied this young woman who spoke in probabilities and honest risks instead of false promises. Why do you care? You don't know us. Rebecca's composure wavered. I had a sister, Lily. She had a facial tumor similar to Ethan's. She died when she was 12, 7 years ago. Rebecca's voice cracked. We couldn't afford treatment. I was 18, her legal guardian after our parents passed. I made the choice to pursue comfort care instead of surgery. I chose saving our house over saving her life. Sarah's anger dissolved into recognition. This wasn't charity. This was penance. Come inside, Sarah said. Meet him properly. Rebecca Morgan arrived the following Saturday with a white van full of portable medical equipment and 2 technicians from a Pittsburgh hospital who volunteered their weekends. They set up in the Carter's living room, transforming the small space into something that resembled a makeshift clinic. Cables snaked across the worn carpet. Machines hummed to life. The ordinary room where Ethan had spent 10 years hiding became, temporarily, a place of clinical possibilities. The MRI was the hardest part. Ethan had to lie completely still inside the narrow tube for 90 minutes while the machine clanged and whirred around him. The space was tight, suffocating. Panic climbed his throat like something with claws. He started counting to keep from screaming. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. He made it to 5,400 before the technician finally said they were done. Sarah held his ankle through the machine the entire time. The only part of him she could reach. Her grip never loosened. When the technician reviewed the images, his face went carefully neutral. Ethan had seen enough doctors to know what that expression meant. Nothing good. The CT scan came next, less claustrophobic, but requiring contrast dye through an IV, his first needle in 10 years. Ethan watched the tech insert it into his arm, watched his own blood flash back into the chamber before the clear liquid pushed through. The sensation was cold, metallic, strange. You're braver than most adults I work with, the tech said. I've had 10 years to practice, Ethan replied. The hardest part came last, high-resolution photography. Rebecca explained they needed detailed documentation from every angle. Professional lighting, clinical precision. Ethan sat on a stool in the center of the living room while a photographer circled him like a predator. Camera clicking in rapid succession. Each flash felt like being seen and erased simultaneously. The lighting made everything more vivid, more real, more impossible to ignore. Ethan forced himself to dissociate, to imagine he was watching someone else sit on that stool. Someone else's face being cataloged and analyzed. Sarah left the room halfway through. She couldn't watch the clinical documentation of her son's suffering. It was one thing to see him every day. Another thing entirely to see him reduced to angles and measurements and medical terminology. When it was finally over, the equipment was packed away. The technicians left. The house felt too quiet after hours of mechanical noise. Results will be sent to Dr. Ramirez in Baltimore, Rebecca explained. She's the head surgeon for our foundation. We should hear back within 72 hours. 3 days, Ethan could count anything in 3 days. 4,320 minutes, 259,200 seconds. He would count every single one. Sarah picked up extra shifts at the hospital. She couldn't sit still, couldn't wait patiently. Motion was the only thing that kept her from flying apart. Ethan drew obsessively, 47 different versions of what his face might look like after, if there was an after, if they said yes instead of no for the 48th time. The call came on Friday evening at 6:17. Ethan had been watching the clock since 6. Rebecca's number appeared on the screen. Sarah's hand shook so badly she almost dropped the phone. "Dr. Ramirez reviewed everything," Rebecca said. "She wants to video call tomorrow morning, at 10 o'clock. Is that okay?" Not yes, not no, somewhere in between, which felt worse than either certainty. "What does that mean?" Sarah asked, her voice tight. "It means there's a conversation to be had." Saturday morning arrived with agonizing slowness. They set up Sarah's laptop on the kitchen table. At exactly 10 o'clock, the call connected. Dr. Anita Ramirez appeared on screen, a Latina woman in her late 40s with kind eyes and an office full of degrees from Johns Hopkins behind her. Photos of smiling patients lined one wall. "Ethan," she said, looking directly at him through the screen. "Thank you for trusting us with your information. I've reviewed your scans extensively, and I want to explain exactly what we're looking at." And she shared his MRI images on screen. Ethan stared at the inside of his own skull. Rendered in black and white, it looked alien and familiar all at once. "You have an arterial venous malformation, an AVU combined with neurofibromatosis type 1. Essentially, the blood vessels in your face formed abnormally, creating a mass of tissue that's been growing since childhood. This area here," she pointed to a bright spot on the scan, "is 3 millimeters from your optic nerve. This area is 5 millimeters from your brain stem." The room tilted slightly. Ethan gripped the edge of the table. "Without surgical intervention," Dr. Ramirez continued, her voice gentle but unflinching, "the AVIM will continue to grow. It could rupture at any time, causing either a massive stroke or death. Based on the current size and location, I'd estimate you have perhaps 5 years before rupture becomes almost certain. And with surgery," Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper, "surgery would require 3 separate procedures over approximately 6 months. Total operating time around 18 hours across all 3 stages. The risks are significant. 15% chance of death during surgery, 25% chance of paralysis or permanent brain damage, 60% chance of some kind of complication. But if successful, normal life expectancy." The silence stretched like taffy. Ethan's brain did the math. 40% chance of death or serious disability, 60% chance at a regular life. But without surgery, 100% chance of death within 5 years. Why didn't local doctors tell us this? Sarah's voice carried an edge now, anger cutting through. Dr. Ramirez pulled up another document. "According to the records I received, Dr. Patterson at Millbrook Community Hospital identified the AVM when Ethan was 6 years old. He recommended specialist consultation. Your insurance company denied coverage." Sarah's face went white, then red. "He never told us it was life-threatening. He said it was a vascular tumor, that we should monitor it. For 9 years he's been monitoring my son's face while knowing. He probably assumed you knew the severity." Dr. Ramirez said, carefully. Or perhaps he thought that without insurance coverage, why burden you with information that would only cause additional distress? That's not his choice to make, Sarah said, her voice shaking with fury. Ethan spoke for the first time. How much does the surgery cost? Doctor Ramirez didn't hesitate. Total cost, including all 3 procedures, hospital stays, anesthesia, and recovery care, runs approximately $340,000. More than their house was worth, more than Sarah would earn in 8 years, an impossible number. We have $80,000 in medical debt already, Sarah said. I make $42,000 a year. I know, Dr. Ramirez said. That's why I'm volunteering my time. I don't take payment for foundation cases. Rebecca leaned into frame. Healing Faces covers hospital costs through partnerships. Facilities donate operating room time. Equipment costs are subsidized through grants. Nursing staff volunteers. Dr. Ramirez donates her expertise. There's no cost to the patient if approved. If approved, Ethan repeated. I need 48 hours to consult with my surgical team. Dr. Ramirez explained. To review every aspect of the risks, to confirm hospital availability. This isn't simple surgery. Ethan, if anything goes wrong, I could be sued again. I could lose my license permanently. Again? Sarah asked. Dr. Ramirez's expression hardened slightly. I used to work at Johns Hopkins, made $800,000 a year. 3 years ago, I performed emergency surgery on a 7-year-old from Honduras who had no insurance, no documentation. The hospital sued me for unauthorized use of facilities. I lost my job, my license for 2 years, spent $2.3 million in legal fees. When I finally won my license back, no hospital would hire me. So now I work the nonprofit circuit, helping families who fall through every crack in our system. Why? Ethan asked. Why risk everything again? Because the Hippocratic Oath doesn't have a price tag. I didn't become a surgeon to check insurance cards. I became a surgeon to save lives. Dr. Ramirez leaned closer to her camera. But I need you to understand. Ethan, you're 15, old enough to have a voice in this decision. This surgery could kill you. It could leave you paralyzed. It could leave you worse than you are now. Or it could give you a normal life. You need to know all of that before we proceed. What are my chances without surgery? Ethan asked. Rupture within 5 years. 80% fatal when it happens. The other 20% typically results in severe disability. So I'm dead anyway. Eventually, yes. Ethan looked at his mother, whose face was streaked with tears she didn't seem to notice. Then 60% is better than 0. Sarah shook her head violently. No, absolutely not. You're a child. You can't make this decision. I've been dead for 10 years. Mom, Ethan's voice was quiet but firm. I've been hiding behind a curtain, counting days, drawing faces I'll never have. I'd rather die trying to live than keep living like I'm already dead. Sarah broke completely. Sobs tore from her throat, raw and animal. Ethan had never seen his mother cry like this, had never heard these sounds come from her. 10 years of held grief came pouring out all at once. Dr. Ramirez gave them space, muting her microphone, looking away from the camera to offer what privacy she could through a screen. When Sarah finally quieted, Unmuted. I'll call Monday with my decision. Take the weekend. Talk, process, whatever you need. But know this, I wouldn't offer if I didn't believe we could succeed. The screen went dark. Saturday night, Sarah couldn't sleep. At 3 a.m, she found herself in the closet, pulling down the box she hadn't touched in 10 years. 47 letters from Michael, one for every insurance rejection. She'd never opened a single one, burned a few, thrown away others, but these 47 had survived her rage. She opened the one on top, dated 8 years ago. Sarah, I know you won't read this. You never do. But I have to write. I didn't leave because I stopped loving Ethan. I left because I couldn't watch him suffer while doing nothing. Every time I looked at him, I saw my failure. Couldn't afford treatment. Couldn't fix him. So I became the thing I could control, absent. I know that's cowardice. Carter men don't quit, but this Carter man broke. I send money when I can. $800 a month to the account, ending in 734. I know it's not enough. Tell Ethan I think about him every day. Tell him I'm sorry. Sarah's hands went numb. She logged into her online banking, searched her transaction history. There, every single month for 10 years, an anonymous deposit. $800, $96,000 total. She'd thought they were clerical errors, maybe charity from the church. Never questioned it because they desperately needed the money. Michael had been paying all along. He hadn't abandoned them. He'd abandoned himself, run from the pain instead of through it. Still wrong, still a coward, but different than she'd believed. For the first time in 10 years, Sarah cried for Michael instead of at him. Sunday evening. Ethan opened his grandfather's pocket watch. Inside the lid, his grandfather had scratched a second inscription Ethan had never noticed before. The bravest thing you can do is try. He wrote a letter, just in case, sealed it, put it under his pillow. Then he opened sketchbook 47 to the last page and drew a door standing slightly open. Light spilled through the gap. On the other side, he drew nothing, just brightness, possibility. He labeled it. This is not the end. This is the beginning. When Sarah came to say good night, Ethan showed her the watch. I'm giving permission, Sarah said, for the surgery. If Dr. Ramirez approves you. What changed your mind? You did. You said you'd rather die trying. Yes, and I realized you've been trying every single day for 10 years. Every morning you wake up is a choice to try. I can't take that choice away from you now. They sat together in the small bedroom, mother and son, on the edge of everything changing or ending, or both. The night before surgery, Sarah and Ethan sat in a cheap Baltimore motel room 6 blocks from Johns Hopkins Hospital. 2 double beds with stiff sheets that smelled of industrial detergent. A heater clanked in the corner, cycling between too hot and too cold. Neither of them could sleep. At 2 a.m, Ethan finally spoke into the darkness. Mom, if I don't wake up, don't. We have to talk about it. I can't. Sarah's voice broke on the second word. I wrote a letter. It's under my pillow at home. Sarah sat up, reaching for the lamp. Weak yellow light flooded the room. Ethan, please don't do this. And I need to tell you something. He turned to face her, his profile sharp against the shadows. I heard you all those nights, crying in the bathroom, counting the rejection letters, throwing up after the debt collection calls. I always heard, Mom. Sarah's face crumpled. You knew? I know everything. The 47 rejections, the 3 jobs, how you skip meals so I can eat, how you haven't bought yourself new clothes in 4 years, how you pay $50 a month on $80,000 in debt that will take you the rest of your life to clear. I'm so sorry, Sarah whispered. I failed you. I should have found a way sooner. Should have. You never failed. Ethan's voice was fierce. You never quit. Dad quit. You didn't. But 47 times they said no, and you called 48 times. Because Rebecca was number 48, you didn't stop trying, not once. Sarah crossed to his bed and collapsed beside him. 10 years of held tears came like a flood. She sobbed against his shoulder while he held her. The roles reversed. The child comforting the parent who'd carried him through a decade of impossible days. You're my whole world, Sarah finally said. I know. That's why I have to try. So you can have a world that's bigger than my bedroom. So you can stop fighting alone. Ethan reached into his backpack and pulled out a faded blue shirt. Old Spice scent still clung faintly to the fabric. Ghost of a man who'd left 10 years ago. Where did you find that? Sarah's voice was barely audible. Back of your closet. Been saving it. For what? Tomorrow. Gonna wear it under the hospital gown. Like he's there. Like part of him came back even if he didn't. Sarah touched the fabric like it might burn her. You forgive him. I forgive him for leaving. I don't forgive him for staying gone. But one thing at a time. Ethan's smile was sad and small. Maybe if I survive this, I'll work on the rest. Sarah performed their ritual. 3 strokes on his right shoulder, their silent language. Love you too, Mom, Ethan said. The words hung in the air between them. First time they'd been spoken aloud in years. The emotion had always been there, but speaking it made it real, made it vulnerable, made it something that could be lost. Sleep came eventually, fitful and brief. At 4 in the morning, they walked through cold November darkness to the hospital. Pre-op was eerily quiet, just overnight staff and dim lighting, and the smell of antiseptic that made everything feel more real and more surreal at once. Ethan changed into the hospital gown but kept Michael's blue shirt underneath. The nurses noticed but didn't comment, understanding that everyone needs some talisman against the dark. The IV went in. Ethan's hands shook despite his best efforts to stay calm. Fear was real now, immediate, sitting on his chest like a living thing. Sarah held his hand. Courage is fear that said its prayers. I'm praying, Grandpa, Ethan whispered at 5:30. They wheeled his bed toward the operating room. Sarah walked beside him as far as the double doors allowed. At the threshold, she leaned down and kissed his forehead, her tears falling onto his face. See you on the other side, Sarah said. Tell Dad. Ethan's voice was already distant from the pre-sedation medications. If he shows up, tell him I wore his shirt. The anesthesiologist placed the mask over his face. Count backwards from 100. Ethan, 199, 98. Mom, gone. Sarah stood in the hallway long after the doors swung shut, staring at smooth metal that gave her nothing back, Rebecca found her there 20 minutes later and gently guided her to the surgical waiting room. Plastic chairs, old magazines, bad coffee, a clock that ticked like a countdown to either everything or nothing. Rebecca stayed. Pastor Miller arrived at 7. Sarah didn't want prayers, but accepted the hand-holding because human contact was the only thing keeping her tethered to earth. Surgery was estimated at 6 to 8 hours. Inside the operating room, Dr. Ramirez made her first incision at 6:50. The tumor was larger than the most recent scans had shown. It had grown in the past month, aggressive and patient in its destruction. She faced an immediate decision: continue or abort. "We're already in," she told her team. "We finish." At hour 3, complications began. Bleeding near the optic nerve, heavy and fast. Blood pressure dropped, 90/60, then 80/50. "Clamp! Doctor!" Ramirez's voice cut through the controlled chaos. "We're losing him." The anesthesiologist's voice was tight. Heart rate erratic, 140, 160. The monitor's steady beep became a frantic rhythm, then a single high-pitched tone that meant only one thing: flatline. Compressions. Dr. Ramirez stepped back while a nurse began chest compressions. Another nurse prepared the crash cart. Time stretched and compressed simultaneously. 30 seconds that felt like 30 years. Clear. Ethan's body jerked with the electrical shock. Nothing. Again clear. Another shock. The room held its breath. The monitor beeped once, twice, rhythm returning. "We've got him back," the anesthesiologist said. "Sinus rhythm, be rising, 70/40, 80/50. Ramirez's hands were steady when she picked up her instruments again, but her voice shook. "Let's not do that again. Everyone stay sharp." Sarah knew nothing of this. She sat in a chapel on the second floor, having left the waiting room because the walls were closing in. She stared at a crucifix on the wall and spoke to whatever might be listening. "If you're real, this is a good time to prove it. I'm not asking for a miracle, just asking you not to take him. Please don't take my boy." She didn't expect an answer. Hadn't expected one in 10 years. But talking to the silence was better than sitting with it. Hour 5, hour 6. Dr. Ramirez removed the tumor piece by careful piece. 2.1 kilograms so far, heavier than a human brain. The weight of 10 years rendered in flesh and blood. Her team was exhausted but focused. Every stitch mattered, every decision permanent. At hour 7, a nurse came to the waiting room. Sarah stood so fast she nearly fell. Her legs had gone numb from sitting. "Still in surgery," the nurse said. "Longer than expected, but he's stable." "What does stable mean?" Sarah's voice was hoarse from disuse and fear. "Means it's not over. Could be another 2 or 3 hours. But he's fighting. He's alive." "Yes, he's alive. He's fighting." Sarah sat back down. She'd aged 100 years in 7 hours. Inside the OR, Dr. Ramirez completed the tumor removal. Total weight, 2.3 kilograms. 5 pounds of tissue that had been slowly killing a 15-year-old boy. She placed it in the stainless steel tray, horrifying and fascinating in equal measure. "Beginning reconstruction," she announced. "Skin grafts from Ethan's thigh, careful reshaping of bone structure, every stitch a prayer, every movement deliberate." At hour 10, final sutures, bandages wrapped around half his face. Ramirez removed her gloves, blood-stained and exhausted. "We did it," she said to her team, but her voice carried uncertainty. Too many complications. Too many moments where they'd nearly lost him. Success wasn't guaranteed until he woke up, and even then, they wouldn't know for days what damage might have been done. At 11 in the morning, Ramirez walked to the waiting room, still wearing her surgical scrubs. Blood spattered her sleeves. Exhaustion lined every part of her face. Sarah saw her coming and stood, hope and terror, balanced on a knife's edge in her chest. "He's alive," Dr. Ramirez said. Sarah's knees buckled. Rebecca caught her before she hit the floor. Surgery went as well as could be hoped. Dr. Ramirez continued carefully. "We removed the entire AVIM and tumor mass. Reconstruction went smoothly. Now we wait for him to wake." She didn't say successful. The nurses noticed, but Sarah was too overwhelmed with relief to catch the careful word choice. They brought Sarah to recovery, where Ethan lay unconscious with a ventilator breathing for him. Monitors beeped steady rhythm. Half his face was obscured by bandages. She couldn't see what the surgery had revealed or created or destroyed. She took his hand and didn't let go. "Remember when you caught your first fish?" Sarah whispered. "You were 5. Threw it back because you felt sorry for it. You've always had the biggest heart." She talked to fill the silence, to keep him tethered to this world with the sound of her voice. "Your dad cried when you were born, held you like you were made of glass. You were so perfect. You still are." At hour 16, post-surgery, Ethan's eyes fluttered open, groggy, confused, fighting through layers of anesthesia. "Baby, can you hear me?" Sarah's voice broke with hope. His lips moved around the ventilator tube. She couldn't understand the words, but knew what he was asking. "You're alive?" she told him. "That's what worked. You're alive." They removed the ventilator an hour later. His first breath without machine assistance was shaky, but real. "Did it work?" His voice was slurred from medication and trauma. Sarah pressed her forehead against his. "You made it through. That's what matters." They moved him to ICU that evening. Becca hugged Sarah for the first time. Pastor Miller said a prayer of thanks. A nurse smiled and said his vitals looked good, very promising. Sarah texted Michael. He made it through surgery. The message showed as delivered, but no response came. Sarah told herself she didn't care, that she'd only informed him as a courtesy, that his silence confirmed everything she'd believed about him for 10 years. That night, Ethan slept heavy with morphine. Sarah slept in the chair beside his bed. First real rest in 36 hours. Monitors beeped their steady song. Everything seemed okay. But at 2 in the morning on the second day post-op, an alarm screamed through the ICU. Ethan's temperature had spiked to 104.3 degrees. His blood pressure was climbing dangerously. Heart rate hit 140 beats per minute. A nurse rushed in, checked his vitals, and immediately paged Dr. Ramirez. The surgical site was infected, sepsis was developing, and suddenly, surviving the surgery meant nothing at all. Dr. Ramirez arrived at 3 in the morning, called from sleep but moving with the practiced urgency of someone who'd weathered too many crises to waste time on panic. She carefully removed Ethan's bandages while Sarah stood rigid against the wall, arms wrapped around herself like the only thing holding her together. The surgical site was red and swollen, weeping clear fluid that shouldn't be there. A distinct smell filled the small site, sweet and rotten all at once. Infection had taken hold with frightening speed. blood cultures, complete panel, start broad-spectrum antibiotics immediately. Ramirez ordered the nurse. Then to "We need to talk privately." They stepped into a consultation room off the ICU. Harsh fluorescent lighting made everything feel more clinical, more final. Ethan has sepsis. The infection entered his bloodstream. Dart. Ramirez didn't soften the word. Sarah was a nurse. She deserved the truth without cushioning. Mortality rate. Sarah's voice was flat, professional, the only way she could ask without screaming, without intervention. 60%, with aggressive treatment, 30 to 40%. You're telling me he might die anyway, after everything. I'm telling you we need to operate again. Clean the wound thoroughly. Remove any infected tissue. It's his best chance. Sarah's laugh was sharp and broken. He can't survive another surgery. His body can't take it. He can't survive sepsis either. Sarah, I know this is impossible, but we have 3 options. Antibiotics alone, which gives him maybe 50-50 odds. Surgery to debride the wound, which carries its own risks but gives us the best chance at stopping the infection. Or we do nothing, and he dies within 3 to 5 days. Those aren't options. Those are different ways of watching him die. Then tell me what you want me to do. Sarah pressed her palms against her eyes. What do you recommend? Surgery. Within 6 hours, before the sepsis spreads further. When 8 this morning, I've already called my team. Sarah looked at this woman who'd given up everything to save children like hers, who was asking her to trust one more time when trust had nearly killed them both. I can't watch him go into that room again. I can't stand in that hallway and wait and wonder if he's dying while I drink bad coffee and pretend to pray. Then don't watch, sign the consent and go anywhere else. But we need to move fast. Sarah signed the paperwork with a hand that had forgotten how to stay steady. Then she walked to the parking garage, bummed a cigarette from a maintenance worker even though she'd never smoked in her life, and stood in the cold November morning trying to remember how to breathe. Inside, Rebecca sat alone in the surgical waiting room, hands folded in her lap, praying to a God she wasn't sure existed, asking Lily for guidance from whatever place the dead go when they're too young to have lived. The second surgery took 4 hours. Dr. Ramirez removed infected tissue, flushed the wound with industrial quantities of saline, debrided everything that looked questionable. It was brutal work, necessary violence in the name of healing. When Ethan came out, his body had decided it had endured enough. All his systems began shutting down in self-defense. His brain went quiet, medically induced coma, the doctor said, though Sarah suspected it was more than that, suspected Ethan had chosen to retreat somewhere they couldn't follow, somewhere pain didn't exist and choices didn't have to be made. Day 1 in the coma. Sarah was numb. Nurses brought food she didn't eat. Becca brought clean clothes she didn't change into. She just sat, holding Ethan's hand, watching monitors that told her he was alive but gave no promise of anything more. Day 2. Sarah tried to bargain with the universe. Take me instead. Let him live. I'll do anything. I'll never ask for anything else. Just let him wake up. The universe didn't answer. It never did. She talked to Ethan constantly, filling the silence with memories. Remember your first word? It wasn't Mama or Dada. You pointed at the sky and said, "Bird, you've always wanted to fly. Don't fly away now. Not yet. Stay here. Stay with me." Day 3. Sarah's phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. "Sarah." Michael's voice, rough and uncertain. "I'm in the parking lot." She said nothing. "I got your I've been driving for 2 days. I'm scared to come up. Scared you'll make me leave. Scared to see him. He's in a coma." Silence on the line. Then ragged breathing that might have been crying. "Can I see him?" "It's been 10 years, Michael. I know I don't deserve—" Sarah hung up, sat staring at her phone, felt the weight of 10 years of anger pressing against 10 years of exhaustion. Anger won for 30 minutes. Then exhaustion made her type. "Room 4 of ICU. Be quiet." Michael appeared in the doorway, looking like a ghost of the man she'd married, older, bearded, carrying damage in every line of his body. He saw Ethan surrounded by machines, face bandaged, unconscious, and his knees buckled. Rebecca caught him before he fell. He cried without sound, shoulders shaking. "You left," Sarah said. "I did." 10 years. I counted every day. He needed you. I know. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, just acknowledgement that they were both standing in this room where their son might be dying because systems failed and people broke, and sometimes there are no good choices, just less terrible ones. Michael pulled up a chair on the opposite side of the bed. Both parents held different hands of their unconscious child, separated by his body literally and metaphorically. Days 4 and 5 passed in strange tandem. Sarah and Michael took turns sleeping, never both gone at once. They didn't speak to each other much, but talked constantly to Ethan. Michael's voice was raw from disuse and regret. "Hey, buddy, it's Dad. Maybe you can hear me, maybe not. I'm sorry. I'm so goddamn sorry I wasn't there. I was dying inside, and I thought leaving would save you from watching it happen. I was wrong about everything except loving you. That part I never got wrong." Sarah listened and said nothing. Some confessions don't require response, just witness. On day 5, Michael showed Sarah his wrists when she asked why he really left. Faint scars, parallel lines, evidence of attempts that failed. "I tried. Twice. I couldn't face him after. Couldn't face you. So I sent money and watched from outside and told myself it was enough. It was never enough." Sarah wanted to stay angry. Anger was easier than the complex mess of understanding why broken people do broken things. But looking at this broken man and their broken son, she found she was too tired for anger. "You should have knocked," she finally said. "You should have asked for help." "I know. Carter men don't quit. You always said—" "I was wrong. Real men ask for help when they're drowning." Day 6 brought no change. Ethan's brain showed activity, but he wouldn't wake. Ramirez said, "Sometimes the body needs more time." Or sometimes, she admitted quietly, the person doesn't want to wake up. Sarah understood. 10 years of pain, maybe unconsciousness, felt like mercy. That evening, she leaned close to Ethan's ear. "I give you permission. If you're tired, if you want to rest, you can go. You've fought enough." Michael heard and exploded. "No, you can't say that. He's suffered enough. He's a fighter." Their first real conversation in 10 years happened screaming in an ICU while their son lay dying between them. Morning of day 7 arrived with pale sunlight through the ICU window. Sarah had fallen asleep in her chair around 4. Exhausted from another night of vigil, Michael sat across from her, still holding Ethan's left hand while she gripped his right. At 6 o'clock, something changed. The monitor's rhythm shifted, subtle, but there. Michael noticed first. "Sarah." His voice was urgent but quiet. "Sarah, look." Ethan's hand twitched. A small movement, barely perceptible, but real. Then his eyes began moving beneath closed lids, rapid and searching. "Ethan!" Sarah was at his side instantly. "Baby, can you hear me?" His eyes fluttered, struggling against the weight of days spent in darkness. The ventilator tube was still in, preventing speech, but his gaze found her face and held it, then moved across the bed and found Michael. His eyes widened. Confusion, then recognition, then something more complex than either parent could read. Ramirez was paged immediately. She arrived within minutes and assessed him quickly. "Let's see if he can breathe on his own." The removal of the ventilator tube was brutal. Ethan gagged and coughed, body fighting the invasion and the extraction equally. His first breath, without mechanical assistance, was ragged but present. He was breathing, actually breathing. His throat was raw from the tube. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "Dad!" That single syllable broke Michael completely. 10 years of held grief came pouring out in great, gasping sobs. He pressed Ethan's hand to his face and cried like a man who'd forgotten how and was now remembering all at once. "I'm here, son. I'm so sorry. I'm here now." Ethan's smile was weak and painful, but unmistakable. "Took you long enough?" The joke, small and fragile, made everyone in the room laugh through tears. Even the nurses, who'd been watching this family break and rebuild themselves over 7 impossible days. Ethan remained in ICU for observation. He was stable but weak. The infection was clearing but slowly. His body had been through trauma that would take months to fully heal. That afternoon, when Ethan was sleeping again and the morphine had pulled him back under, Sarah and Michael stood in the hallway having the conversation they should have had 10 years ago. "Why did you really come?" Sarah asked. "The balloon?" "What?" "Red balloon. Flew past my apartment window in Pittsburgh a few weeks ago. I know it sounds insane, but I just knew it was his. Felt it in my bones. Then I saw the news about his surgery. I had to come." "That's crazy." "Maybe. Or maybe it's the only sane thing I've felt in a decade." Michael pulled up his sleeves, showing his wrists fully in daylight. The scars were faded but unmistakable. 2 attempts, 2 failures, evidence of a man who'd tried to erase himself and been too coward to finish the job. "I didn't leave because I stopped loving him. I left because I was dying. Depression swallowed me whole after the diagnosis. Every time I looked at Ethan, I saw my failure. Couldn't afford treatment, couldn't fix him, couldn't save him. So I thought maybe my life insurance could try to make that happen. Twice. Both times I survived and hated myself more for it." Sarah stared at the scars, then at his face. "You were going to kill yourself." "I was going to give you $300,000 and remove the burden of watching me fall apart. Seemed logical at the time. Depression makes its own terrible math. You should have told me." "How Carter men don't quit." "That's what I always said. How do I admit I wanted to quit breathing? So I left instead, sent money every month from Pittsburgh, drove back once a month to sit outside the house and watch you both through the windows like some kind of ghost." Sarah's hand connected with his face before she realized she'd moved. The slap echoed in the empty hallway. "You were there outside our house, and you never knocked." Michael took the hit without flinching. "I couldn't face you, couldn't face him. Thought you were better off without me. I was wrong about everything except the loving you part that I never got wrong. He needed a father, not money, not shadows watching through windows. A father. I know. Do you really know what it was like working 3 jobs while you played ghost? Hearing him cry at night, watching him hide behind curtains because one goddamn time, a little girl screamed when she saw his face. He was 7 years old. Michael. 7? I know. No. You don't. You left before it got really hard, before the suicide notes, before the days he didn't speak at all, before I had to check if he was breathing because I was so scared I'd find him dead." Michael's face crumbled. "Suicide notes. 2 of them, age 11 and 14. He never went through with it, but he wrote them, sealed them, kept them under his pillow like some people keep prayers." The hallway was silent, except for the distant beeping of machines and the quiet sounds of suffering that filled every hospital everywhere. "I can't forgive you yet," Sarah said finally. "Maybe not ever. But Ethan gets to decide what happens next. About you, not me. If he wants you gone, you go. If he wants you to stay, we'll figure it out. But this is his choice now. What if he hates me? Then you'll live with that. You've been living with worse." That evening, Dr. Ramirez came to check on Ethan. He was stronger now, sitting up slightly, able to speak without quite so much pain. "Thank you," Ethan said, "for saving me. I didn't save you alone. You saved yourself by choosing to try. Becca told me you lost your job for helping people like me." Ramirez sat in the chair Sarah had vacated. "I lost more than my job. I lost my marriage, my savings, my reputation, my relationship with my daughter." "Your daughter." "I was married, had a 12-year-old daughter, when Johns Hopkins sued me, and I chose to fight rather than settle. My husband gave me an ultimatum. Choose the career or choose the crusade. I chose this. He took our daughter, and I haven't seen her in 4 years. She won't answer my calls." Ethan was quiet for a long time. Was it worth it? Dr. Ramirez considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "Ask me that when you buy your first Dr. Pepper at a gas station like a normal kid, when you walk down a street without hiding, when you look in a mirror and see someone you recognize, then I'll know if it was worth it." "How did you know about the Dr. Pepper?" "Your mom told me about the dream. 10 years of dreaming about something so small it breaks my heart. That's why I do this. So kids can have dreams bigger than just surviving." The next day, Becca visited, bringing all 47 of Ethan's sketchbooks from home. She'd driven back to Millbrook and retrieved them, understanding somehow that he'd need them. "You brought all of them." Ethan touched the stack like they were sacred texts. "Seemed important. Why do you really do this, Becca?" "The real reason." She sat on the edge of his bed and told him everything. About Lily, about being 18 and becoming guardian after their parents died, about the choice between $400,000 in treatment or keeping their house, about choosing the house, about watching Lily die slowly in hospice, asking every day why they weren't trying to fix her anymore. I told her they were trying, but they weren't. I'd stopped treatment to save our home. Her last words were, "Becca, promise you'll help other kids." I promised. She died that night. "You're not helping me," Ethan said quietly. "You're keeping a promise to her." "Yes, that's okay. Promises matter, especially the ones you make to people who are gone." Becca's face crumpled. "She'd be 17 now, your age in 2 years. Sometimes I see her in you, in your eyes, in the way you're kind even when the world hasn't been kind to you." "Then I'll live for both of us," Ethan said. "That's how promises work, right? We carry the people we lost until they're not lost anymore, just part of who we are." 2 weeks later, they removed the bandages for the final time. Ethan had refused to look until now, scared of what he'd see or wouldn't see. But Dr. Ramirez said it was time. Sarah brought a small mirror, set it on the table beside his bed. "You don't have to," she said, "but it's here when you're ready." The mirror sat untouched for 3 days. On the 4th day, Sarah and Michael left to get coffee. Ethan was alone. He picked up the mirror, hands shaking, slowly unwrapped the remaining bandages that covered the left side of his face, and looked. The face in the mirror was a stranger's. Ethan stared at the left side where the tumor had been, where 10 years of growth had hidden the architecture of his actual death. Scar tissue stretched from temple to jaw, angry red and raw, still healing. The eye socket was empty, the blind eye removed during surgery as expected. But the shape was there, cheekbone visible for the first time in a decade, jaw sitting level instead of pulled sideways, symmetrical, human. He traced the scar with his finger. The texture was different from the rest of his skin, rougher, alien, but flat. He could touch his own face without encountering that mass of tissue that had defined him for so long. He didn't smile, didn't cry, just looked, meeting himself for the first time. "Hello," he whispered to the reflection. Sarah returned to find him still holding the mirror. She froze in the doorway, breath catching. "Oh, baby." "I look different," Ethan said. "You look like you—" "I don't know who that is." Sarah sat beside him, taking his free hand. "Then you have the rest of your life to figure it out." 4 weeks after the second surgery, Ethan was finally discharged. A medical van transported him back to Millbrook, his first time outside the hospital in nearly 2 months, first time outside at all in 6 years. The sunlight was overwhelming, too bright, making his remaining eye water. The sounds were too many, too loud. The space was terrifying in its openness. Sarah held his hand the entire 3-hour drive. Millbrook looked the same and completely different. The town hadn't changed, but Ethan had changed, and that made everything unfamiliar. Mrs. Patterson was on her porch as they pulled up. She waved, a simple gesture, and crucially, didn't stir up. That small mercy felt monumental inside the house. Ethan went directly to his window alcove. The green curtain was still there, pulled back now. The covered mirror remained on his dresser, but the red balloon was gone. Released weeks ago in a moment of surrender or hope or both. A blue balloon sat in its place, new color, new chapter. "Wrong color," Ethan said. "I know," Sarah replied, "but red was for surviving, blue is for living. Different thing." Ethan smiled, actually smiled, and it hurt his healing face, but he didn't care. Okay. That first night home, he couldn't sleep in his bed. Too much had happened. too much had changed. He slept on the couch instead, and Sarah slept on the other couch, watching over him like she had when he was small and fevered, and she could still protect him from everything. Michael slept in his car outside, not ready to come in, not ready to be invited, just close enough to be there if needed. The family was together, but separate, better than nothing, not yet whole, but healing in the way that broken things do. 6 weeks after coming home, Ethan made his decision. "Mom, I want to go to the store." "Which store?" "Miller's Gas and Grocery." Sarah understood immediately. The dream, 10 years of dreaming about something so small the world would never notice. "Are you sure?" "I am sure." They walked 0.3 miles from house to store. It might as well have been a marathon. Ethan wore his gray hoodie for comfort, but kept the hood down, an act of bravery that cost him everything and nothing at once. Michael walked 10 feet behind, respectful distance, close enough to help if needed, far enough to give suite. The bell above the door jingled when they entered. Mr. Miller looked up from behind the counter, and his face transformed with recognition and something that looked like joy. "Ethan Carter, E.T. Well, I'll be damned. Heard you were back. Glad you made it, son." "Thank you, Mr. Miller." Ethan walked to the refrigerated section on legs that wanted to give out. Rows of drinks, all the choices in the world, overwhelming after years of nothing. He found it. Dr. Pepper. Original, not diet. The can was cold and solid and real in his hand. At the counter, Mr. Miller rang it up. $2.50. Ethan handed him a $20 bill, money saved from birthdays and Christmases over the years. "Son, you need change." "No, sir." "Keep it. That's $17.50 change. I've been waiting 10 years for this. Mr. Miller, it's worth $1 million to me." Mr. Miller's eyes went wet. He understood. This wasn't about a soda. This was about being normal enough to buy one, about standing in public, about choosing something for yourself. "Yes, sir. Thank you kindly." Mr. Miller's voice was thick with emotion. He didn't try to hide. Outside, Ethan opened the can. The sound of carbonation escaping was the best thing he'd ever heard. He took the first sip, sweet, old, normal, not special soda, but a special moment. The most ordinary, extraordinary thing. "How is it?" Michael asked. "Tastes like freedom." Later that day, Mr. Miller posted on Facebook, "Ethan Carter bought his first Dr. Pepper today. Most important, $2.50 I've ever received. Welcome back, son. We missed you." The post went viral in Millbrook, then spread to neighboring towns. People began to understand what they'd missed while Ethan was hidden. The cost of their silence and their fear. 2 weeks later, Becca called. "Would you be willing to speak congressional committee in Washington? They're investigating insurance practices." "I'm 15. That's exactly why your voice matters. These are the people who can change things, but only if they hear from people like you." "I don't know if I can." "You don't have to." But Ethan, 127 families that contacted us after your story hit the news. 127 kids like you, stuck behind curtains, waiting for someone to say yes. Your voice could help them. Ethan talked to his parents. Family discussion. All three together at the same table for the first time in a decade. What would Grandpa say? Ethan asked Sarah. She touched the pocket watch he always carried now. Courage is fear that has said its prayers. Then I'm going. In Washington 3 weeks later, Ethan wore a suit for the first time in his life. Sarah had bought it for him, the first new clothes either of them had purchased in years. He sat at a table facing a panel of senators and an audience packed with press, advocates, and insurance company lobbyists. He told them about 47 rejections, about his mother working 3 jobs, about 10 years behind a curtain. He showed them a photograph of the tumor, and gasps rippled through the room. Then he showed them a photograph of his face now, scarred but healing, and the room went silent. "I didn't need 47 chances," Ethan said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I needed one person who said yes instead of no. That shouldn't be rare. That should be guaranteed. Every child in this country should have the right to a life beyond survival." The room erupted in standing ovation, unusual for congressional testimony. 3 insurance companies announced reviews of their pre-existing condition policies within a week. Healing Faces Foundation received $4 million in donations. 127 families got calls saying yes instead of no. Nothing changed overnight, but seeds were planted 6 months later. Spring had come to Millbrook. Ethan was attending community college online, working toward his GED. He still lived with Sarah, but the house felt different now, lighter. Michael visited every weekend, slowly rebuilding something that would never be what it was, but might become something new. Mrs. Patterson stopped by one Saturday morning. "Would you teach art to kids at the community center? We've got 6 children, all with different challenges. They need someone who understands." "Me teach." "You're the most qualified person in town. You know what it means to feel invisible." Saturday morning, Ethan stood in front of 6 children aged 7 to 12, one in a wheelchair, one with hearing aids, one with a facial scar similar to his own, all of them quiet, scared, waiting to be judged. "Hi, I'm Mr. Carter. I'm going to teach you how to draw monsters." The kids looked confused. Everyone thinks monsters are scary. But what if monsters are just misunderstood? What if the scariest thing isn't how we look, but how we feel? He handed out paper and crayons. Draw how you feel, not what you see in the mirror, how you feel inside. The children drew dragons with kind eyes, creatures with enormous hearts, broken things made beautiful through color and imagination. One girl with a facial scar drew a tree with golden roots spreading underground. "Tell me about this," Ethan said. "The roots are underground. Nobody sees them, but they're what keeps the tree alive. The strongest part." Ethan's vision blurred. "Yes, they are." After class, parents collected their children. One mother approached him with the tears in her eyes. "Thank you. She hasn't smiled in months. I understand what that's like. I know you do. That's why you're the right teacher." When everyone left, Ethan stood alone in the empty room. He walked to the whiteboard and wrote, "You are more than what they see. Mr. Carter, class next Saturday." He caught his reflection in the window, saw his scar, his missing eye, but also saw something else. A teacher, a survivor, a person who'd learned that the heaviest things we carry can become the strongest parts of ourselves. That evening, Sarah and Ethan sat beneath the oak tree in their backyard, the same tree where she'd watched him hide for years. Now they sat together watching the sunset paint the sky in gold and red. "You did it," Sarah said. "Did what?" "Became who you were supposed to be." "Who's that?" "Someone who helps others become who they're supposed to be." Ethan opened a new sketchbook, number 48, on the first page. He drew a door standing wide open with light flooding through. He wrote beneath it, "This is not the end. This is the beginning." "What's through the doors?" Sarah asked. "I don't know yet, but I'm not scared anymore." A red balloon floated into view from somewhere beyond the fence. Michael had released it from his apartment in Pittsburgh this morning, a symbol of connection across distance, of love that survives its own breaking. Ethan and Sarah watched it rise into the darkening sky, free and impossible and real. After Ethan's testimony, 40 families received funding through Healing Faces Foundation. Legislation requiring insurance coverage for congenital facial differences was introduced in 3 states. Ethan continued teaching art every Saturday to children who needed to know that survival was only the beginning. And every week he bought a Dr. Pepper at Miller's Gas and Grocery. They still tasted like freedom. For those of us who've lived long enough to understand that time doesn't heal all wounds, but teaches us how to carry them. Ethan's story reminds us of something profound. We've all hidden behind our own curtains at some point, whether literal or metaphorical. Perhaps it was a diagnosis that changed everything, a child who struggled while we felt helpless, or a moment when the system failed us and we had no voice loud enough to be heard. We know what it means to count rejections, to work jobs that break our bodies to save the ones we love, to make impossible choices between dignity and survival. But we also know what Ethan learned, that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's waking up day after day and choosing to try again. It's the quiet heroism of parents like Sarah, working 3 jobs in silence. It's the redemption of broken men like Michael, finding their way home. It's ordinary people doing extraordinary things because love demands it. Ethan waited 10 years for his Dr. Pepper moment. What's yours? What seemingly small dream have you been waiting for? Or what impossible battle did you fight that nobody saw? Share your story below. Your voice matters. Someone needs to hear that they're not alone.